And thanks for organising this and inviting me to give a talk. So those of you might have seen me talk about digital technologies and cleaning over the last few years, and some of this will be familiar, but there'll also be some of the updated activities and the new results we've got in the area. One of the things I also want to just bring in the talk is the COVID situation and how this has affected factory cleaning. I've been speaking to some of the collaborators, some of the contacts in the industry, so I thought it would be interesting just to touch on that as well a bit in this talk. And I think one of the other things that's interesting is we're researching in the food and drink sector in new technologies. What we tend to find is that the food sector is a bit slower to adopt some of these new technologies to other sectors. When we think of cutting edge engineering, manufacturing, we tend to think of the high tech areas such as aerospace. But what's really interesting during the crisis and the pandemic, it's actually other sectors looking at what the food and drink sector does in terms of safety and hygiene and how they can use some of those best practices. So I just want to talk a bit about that as well. Just a bit of an introduction. As Sammy said, I'm an associate professor of chemical engineering at the University of Nottingham, and the research group I'm in is food, water, waste, and my particular area in that is sensors and data analytics within food and drink manufacturing. We work a lot with ultrasonic sensors, which I'll talk about today, optical sensors, that can be imaging systems, camera systems, or it could be spectroscopic systems. So we'll talk a bit about some near infrared techniques. We do a lot of work in machine learning and predictive analytics. I wouldn't say we do research in machine learning, but we do use those techniques. And today I want to talk about some of the great things they can do, as well as some of the limitations and how we have to get over those limitations if we want to use these technologies effectively in production environments. And the application areas we tend to work on are three. One of them is cleaning and hygiene, which I'll talk about today. That's a big area of research for our group. The other one is process optimization. This is monitoring processes such as mixing, fermentation, extrusion. And the third one is really sensors and analytics for online inspection, and that could be inspection of the feedstocks, the raw materials, or the final products that are being manufactured in these factories. Today I'm going to talk a bit about the importance of factory cleaning. Then I'm going to talk about smart food manufacturing and specifically sensors and machine learning. So at the minute, if you're not aware, we're in the fourth industrial revolution, all about these fantastic digital technologies which are going to make everything better, faster, cheaper. But I want to talk about what does that mean for the food and drink sector, and how do we actually use these technologies and employ them effectively. Then I'm going to talk a bit about some of the projects we've been working on. So self-optimizing cleaning place is it's a combination of projects funded by Innovate UK and some other sources, looking at sensor techniques that optimize CIP, and then I'll go into robot clean and IoT enhanced factory cleaning projects. And then we'll just have a summary and some thoughts. I think it's worth also mentioning that the research we do in our group tends to be a lot more applied than a lot of research groups. So we work a lot with industry partners, and we're really looking at what are some of those challenges taking these sensor technologies out of the lab and into the factory. And there's always going to be business challenges around the cost and deployment. There's also challenges about how easy are they to use and maintain and interpret some of the results. So I want to pick up on some of those areas as we go through this talk. I think my slides have frozen. Oh, there we go. So a bit about the importance of cleaning. So food and drink manufacturing is the largest manufacturing sector in the UK. So it contributes approximately 30 billion to the economy annually. And if you look at that globally, it's huge. I mean, we all know someone who works in food and drink is some part of it, whether it's the manufacturing, the agriculture, the retail side, the hospitality side. It is critical, huge sector. Cleaning the factories is essential to ensure they remain hygienic, minimise cross-contamination of materials. So this could be allergens, for example, or materials people are intolerant to. And the vast majority of cleaning is still completed manually by factory operators. And there's another challenge here as well, because if the factory operators do some cleaning during production, they probably have responsibilities as well to maybe check the quality of the items being manufactured, or maintain the machines if there's a blockage or if there's an issue. So it's part of a plethora of tasks, and sometimes it doesn't always get the full attention that it needs to. So it's very traditional. Just a bit about the kind of sustainability impact of cleaning as well. So in beer production, about 35% of the water is spent cleaning. So typically they used to say for every pint of beer, it takes 7 pints of water. and you can see 2 to 3 of those are spent on cleaning it, and that's because you have the hot side where you're heating up the malts, pumping them around, boiling the water, and that burns onto the equipment, so you need to clean that off. In the dairy sector, again, a lot of high temperature processing in the UHT milk, ultra high temperature milk, long life. Again, this burns onto the equipment, the heat exchangers, and it takes a lot of energy, a lot of water, a lot of chemicals to clean it. So that's the environmental impact of this. So it's something you have to do, but it doesn't add any value, doesn't make your product better. But if you get it wrong, there's severe consequences. It's not great for the environment. So this is always the kind of triangle we see at the bottom of this slide. Cleaning and disinfecting, really, really important, but it's not great for the environment, and it costs you a lot of money and a lot of time as well. And this is just the thought of how can we take some of the practices that the food sector is doing in cleaning, and how can we apply them to other areas. So these are some examples of places where we didn't necessarily think about the cleaning and disinfecting challenge, such as transport buses, restaurants now, museums, but these are areas that are starting to learn from the food sector. Just before I go on as well, like I mentioned earlier, I've been reaching out to my contacts and I've been saying, what have you been doing differently since the pandemic? And in terms of actually cleaning the factory and cleaning the equipment, the answer across the board is nothing different. And that's, some people might think that's surprising, but it's not really. It's because they had such well-validated methods of cleaning in the first place that they didn't really need to change anything. Everything that's happened in the factory due to COVID has really been about the people working in the factory. How do we keep them safe? So you don't want factory operators standing opposite each other. You wouldn't want cleaning teams interacting with each other. It's about putting screens up. Everyone already has PPE on, face coverings on there. It is standard for our sector. But things like doors, you don't want common touch points where people are pushing through. Areas where people might be having a break or how they use toilet facility. These are where all the changes have been going in. But the actual cleaning of the factory and the factory equipment has remained the same because it already works. It's so good. So that's reassuring. So I just want to talk a bit about smart technologies and what do we mean. So in the UK, we have an initiative called Made Smarter, and this is what we're focusing all our digital manufacturing on. And this is around 5 what we call enabling technologies, or IDTs, which are industrial digital technologies. So we're all familiar. If we talk about digital technologies, we think about smartphones, we think about connected domestic devices, we're thinking about cars that drive ourselves. But IDTs, it's the industrial side of it. So these technologies that are used in the factory environment. The 5 areas within that tend to be robotics and automation, industrial Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things is all about connected devices. So this could be a sensor such as a camera or a thermocouple which is connected to the cloud, which means anyone can log in if they've got access and look at that data in real time remotely. And this is how things like your smart speakers work at home. When you say Alexa or Hey Google and ask it to do something, that is just a speaker that is then connected to the internet, and it's in the internet where it decides what you said through natural language processing, and then determines what it is you want to do, whether that's turn your lights up, order you something off an online retailer. So that's the Internet of Things. Industrial Internet of Things is just that in a factory setting. Virtual reality and augmented reality, this is adding layers of information or putting people in these virtual environments. Additive manufacturing, 3D printing, and the one at the top is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics. If we look at the food and drink sector, now this is a sector characterized by high volume of low value products. So what we talk about here is that every item you make, or the manufacturer makes, there's a very, very small profit margin. So they make their money by making lots of it. So it has very different investment models for these new technologies. So for example, robotics, fantastic technology, but they can be expensive to deploy. So maybe they're not quite right for some food manufacturers, especially the small and medium enterprises. For the larger ones, they can invest in. If we look over other things around the food and drink sector, there's many SMEs, so lots of small companies, so they can't always afford these expensive ones, as I just mentioned. But they also have a lot of legacy equipment. We do get new food factories being built all the time, but the majority of these are older buildings. So any technology has got to integrate with the current plant that's already there. Excuse me. Other unique challenges that we have in the food and drink sector, these are biological materials, so they're alive, and they're highly variable as well. So if you're making a car, every piece of metal coming in will have to a specific shape, density, material properties, very uniform. No two carrots or potatoes are the same as they're coming in, and this is a real challenge, especially for these automation technologies. We also have the challenges around hygiene and food safety, and we still have many manual operations, so lots of people still work in food factories. So we look at these 5 industrial digital technologies. The 2 that I see having the most traction are the data analytics, as long as that can provide value, actionable information, and the Internet of Things, the sensors. And there's quite a lot of reports you can find from the industry that show actually the technologies they're going to invest in and the technologies they see with the most potential are these 2. And they work really well together, because if you've got the IoT connected to your sensor, collecting the data, do all the really clever analytics in the cloud remotely. And you can do some really cool things by combining these technologies. You can have data coming from 3 or 4 different factories making similar products, and you can use them to build models to take advantage of all that data, so then they have a better chance of generalizing it and being more useful. So a little bit about today we in the dustbin there. We hear this term AI, and we know it's got something to do with intelligence and data and making predictions, but I think we need to just be really careful what we mean by these. So we're at the bottom, we have artificial intelligence, and it's very difficult to find an absolute precise, everyone agrees definition, but it's the ability of a system or an algorithm or technology to make a decision. That's how I see it, and do something intelligent, solve a complicated task. So we talk about the type of AI that we do and that you hear about all the time is what we call narrow AI. So it's very good at doing one task. Is this biscuit good quality? Yes or no? Is this pipe clean? Yes or no? The people are really pushing this, and the real future that some people are scared about is the artificial general intelligence, where it can do lots of different tasks. It can learn different tasks. It can learn new ways to learn. The subset of that is machine learning, and this is really what the vast majority of people do when they talk about AI. Machine learning. This is collecting a lot of data. So, for example, we might have a factory floor that we're trying to clean, and we might have some imaging system, a simple camera, or it could be operating in UV, because we know that that's very good for showing up dirt. And we could show it pictures of clean factory floors and dirty factory floors. So we've got all this data, it's all labeled dirty or clean. Then we can use that to develop an algorithm that when we show it a picture that we don't know if it's dirty or clean, it can look at some of the features it's extracted, so pixel intensity, features of shapes, which could be stains, and it can determine. That's what machine learning is. And deep learning is one of these terms. And deep learning is just one of the algorithms of machine learning. So I'm going to talk, most of the stuff I'll talk about today is shallow learning, which means it's the basic machine learning, not the deep learning. So deep learning is just one algorithm. It's artificial neural networks with more layers, more nodes, slightly more complex. And deep learning, the actual methods and the theory has been around a long time. The problem's been there hasn't been enough data, or always been enough data. They haven't had the computer power to process these and to train these algorithms in a realistic time frame. So that's why deep learning is becoming really popular, and we started hearing about it a lot more. If we just go to the top of the slide, I can talk a bit about the sensors in factories. So there's some requirements they must be. They must be cost effective. For any new technology, no matter how cool it is, how brilliant we think it are, the business case has got to work. If the solution costs more than the problem, it's not a solution, and that's the thing we've always got to think about. And I think we've seen examples where factories and engineering people get excited by new technology that they could deploy, but they haven't actually thought, is this worthwhile? What will this sensor allow me to do? So always start with the problem, and I've got some slides later to show about that. Sensors must work continuously in production environments, and this is absolutely key. If it works for the first few days, then you have a problem, or it needs calibrating again, it's probably not going to fly. So this needs to be built into, be connected, so we can make the most of these other technologies, such as machine learning, and must produce actual information. It must be able to enable you to do something you couldn't do before. Typical types of sensors, so optical, imaging, and spectroscopic systems. These are the most common ones, and these will always be the most common ones because the technology is very mature. Lots of applications, it's demonstrated its value, and it works well. One of the limitations with the optical and sensors is they're like our eyes, they can only see the surface, you can't see through the product. So you would be able to tell if a factory floor's clean or dirty on the surface, but For example, if you had a tin of soup and you wanted to see if there was any foreign bodies and material that shouldn't be in there, you obviously couldn't use an imaging system because you can't see through the can. Ultrasonic and acoustic systems, which is something I've worked about, and I'll talk a bit more about that. X-ray, very popular, more expensive as a technology, and there is still challenges around that. You can do some great stuff, 3D imaging offline, micro CT tomography, but for online, this tends to be X-ray for looking for foreign bodies, so when pieces of metal or pieces of plastic have got in there. And there's a whole range of technologies around electrical techniques and microwave sensing, dielectric, electrical terahertz. These are the main types of sensors that are being used. It's physical sensors. We've also got biological sensors and gas sensors as well. So talk a bit about the benefits and challenges of machine learning. So machine learning, you're collecting a lot of data and you're using to develop an algorithm, a model that can, when you put some other data in, it will make a prediction. And then we've got to remember there is a prediction. So that's really important. The different types of models we can develop are classification. So is this floor clean or dirty? Yes or no. That would be a classification problem, putting it into different classes, or it could be a regression problem, like how much dirt is in that room. I mean, you could actually use the same data to develop classification and regression models, and we do some of this in our work on other projects, and there's actually benefits of doing both of those. Other differences between machine learning is supervised, where you've got all that labeled data that we talked about before, unsupervised, semi-supervised. An area we've been working on in the last few months is transfer learning, which is domain adaptation, which is really exciting because it's looking at a problem in one space, developing an algorithm based on that knowledge, that data, and transferring it to a similar problem. And the other benefits are models can improve, as more or better data becomes available, can generate actionable information, and many off-the-shelf methods available. So there's lots of providers now who have these tools, and you just take your data and tweak that. I missed out the first one, which is they do not require first principle models, these physical models. And this has been something that's always been a barrier to some of the work we've tried to do with ultrasound. So we tried to develop ultrasound systems, say monitor crystallization, monitor emulsion systems, and we get it to work really, really well in the lab. And we develop a mathematical model of how the sound wave interacts with that complex material. Well, then when we try and take it in the factory where it's noisy, it's variable temperature, humidity, vibration, very, very difficult to apply that model in the wild. What we can, by using the machine learning with data collection for a while, we can do it. So this is probably the main reason we use machine learning. But it's not perfect, and that's one of the things we have to understand. The challenge is the model is only as good as the data. If you've got bad data, you'll have a bad model. Data collection and labeling can be expensive. So it might be easy for us to run a video camera in the corner of our factory, taking pictures of the floor. We want to know if it's dirty or clean. But someone has to go through that video and for every picture say, was it dirty or clean? So this is when you do the capture things, when you go on websites and it's asking you to point out signs and with pictures of cars, and that's actually using your bit to label data for different models. But these are this is the thing that can take the time to do it. And I often think food and drink manufacturing is a perfect case study for machine learning, because if you look at a car factory, how many cars do they make a day? You look at a cookie factory or a bread factory, how many loaves of bread do they make a day? Well, it's orders of magnitude more, and each one of those is a data point. So we can get a lot of data, but the challenge is labeling it. Other problems you tend to get with machine learning is the overfitting and the generalization. This is where the model fits the training data really well, but then when you try and apply it to data, which might be a different factory or a slightly different area, it doesn't work very well on that. And the other ones are around explainability, interpretability, and trustworthiness. So with the model, you know it's working, but you don't always know why, and that's a worry. And what does it actually mean, and do we trust it? So, for example, if we've got a sensor telling us, is this biscuit of good quality, yes or no, and that's 95% accurate, we'd probably be very happy with that, because at the minute our only alternative is having someone stood at the line trying to look at every biscuit, so they're probably not going to be 95% accurate. We're happy with that. If this sensor and data system is predicting does this food contain allergens and it's 95% accurate, that's probably not enough, because if we get it wrong, the chances are harm to a person. So we've got to understand this. And this leads me to my next point. I always think these technologies are great, but we always need to keep a human in the loop, have a human looking at this. This is a bit about the expertise we need to run some of these systems. So if you want to develop some intelligent sensor system in your factory environment, I believe you need expertise in 4 areas. One is in the materials. So food materials are highly complex, highly variable. So you need a food scientist, physical chemist who understands the materials. You need a process engineer who understands the manufacturing process. That can be the individual machines and the whole plant, the whole line. You need individuals who understand the sensor technology, what's its mode of operations, what's its strengths, what's its weaknesses. You also need the data scientists who understand some of the challenges, like I've talked about labeling and overfitting. What tends to happen is the food manufacturers understand their materials and they understand their process. And then they'll employ a sensor company, and the sensor company might have some background in data analytics, and that's how that would work. And that's how you get these team of 4 people together. Or it might be that if it's a large company, they might already have their data analysis people working there. So then they purchase the sensor and they've got all 4. But I found to get these things to work properly, you need to have skills across those 4 areas. And I think the other thing you can never underestimate is you need to have champions within an organisation and engagement with all job families. It might be well enough if someone in the boardroom thinks this is a great idea, but if the people running the factory don't, it's going to be very difficult to deploy, and you need to get people engaged across those. So again, some of the challenges aren't always technical, and you need to be aware of those if you're deploying these technologies. Oh, excuse me. This is just the methodology we go through when we're developing these intelligent sensor systems. So on this slide, this is a process for something we're working on, which is intelligent sensors for resource efficiency problems. So this is using materials more effectively, using energy, creating less waste. And the framework methodology we developed here, the green represents challenge, the orange represents the sensor part, and the blue is the machine learning part. And you can see how it works together. So you need to start with understanding what your problem is. So your problem might be to reduce the energy used in a mixing operation, or to reduce the amount of reject streams to waste. Once you determine that, you need to look at what is the KPI, what's the resource KPI. This could be energy used, it could also be time, because if you're doing something for longer than you have to, be using more resources. You then need to determine what's the requirement of the sensor. The sensor takes the data to what's the intelligent sensor, and the intelligent sensor for us is the hardware component combined with the model. What does the output of the model need to be? Once we know that, we determine the sensor. So again, if it's on a surface, probably is not sending, it needs to transmit through, have to look at another technology. And here you could actually combine technologies into multi-sensor data fusion, which is an area. Then you would collect your data, label it. The blue side is your standard machine learning methodology. Choose the models you want to use. Feature engineering, so that's taking your sensor data and deciding what part of that you want to use, what are the features, because sensor data can be really high in dimensionality. If you've got a spectroscopic technique like near-infrared, every wavelength you would have some form of intensity. Ultrasound, you'd have a wave, so when you digitize that, it's a lot of data. Same with imaging, for every pixel have an intensity related to its light. So you need to reduce that down to a number of features that represent the problem, make the models easier to train. And we train the model, lots of different algorithms, and we do the validation. So one of the things I should have said is, once you've got your training data, you tend to partition that. So the training part, you have a validation part, and then you have a testing part. The testing part you leave aside, go to the training part, you train your model, you test that trained model on the small piece of validation that you've got back. You then tweak your model hyperparameters. So this could be some starting values, it could be the architecture, the number of nodes in a neural network, for example. Then you keep going until you've got good validation, then you test it. And the final thing is, does it link back? Does it give you the information you need for your problem at the beginning? So this is about resource efficiency. It could be about time, cost, reject rate, along those. But this is the process we tend to use. So to get on to the cleaning, I'll try and go through these a little bit faster. So the self-optimizing cleaning place. So cleaning place is, when you clean a factory, you need to clean the internal surfaces, but also the external surfaces of the factory. This is all about the internal surfaces. And say, for example, you've got a simple factory that's making a soup, you might be cooking some materials, vegetables, up some meat, pump them into a big vessel, add your sauce, you might be, then after you've deposited that in your can, off it's gone to distribution. What we need to do then is clean the equipment. So traditionally, this would have been a manual task, take the equipment apart, clean it, and that's very time consuming, not very effective. And productivity is really key here for our sector. We've got to get food out the door as quickly as possible. The CIP is an automated process, and it's like your dishwasher at home. You press a button, it sends water through to get rid of the heavy soiling, there's some chemicals through, then you rinse away the water, and you're left with a clean factory. So we've been working with several years now, Loughborough University, some industrial partners, and the whole problem with these cleaning processes is it's like a dishwasher. Every time you open it up, the plates are clean, which is fantastic. That's what you want. But if you've been running that for 2 hours, they might have been clean 90 minutes ago. The rest of that time, you've been paid for water and energy, which hasn't really been doing anything because they were clean after one of the initial stages. That's bad for you in your house, but imagine that on an industrial scale, much bigger volumes. It's really bad for the environment. It's bad for the manufacturer. When we did some analysis, we found that the actual biggest cost was time. And the time's becoming an even bigger problem now because of this thing called mass customization. So years ago, you would just get one type of a product. So one of the companies we worked with made a Christmas dessert product. And when we were working with them, they said now they make 20 varieties. So ones with different premium ingredients, ones with lower sugar, lower fat. Between each batch, they have to clean. So whereas once a day they were cleaning the processing equipment, now between each batch, which could be 5 or 6 batches a day, they have to clean different formulations. So this is a really big problem, cost big. So what our proposed solution was to put some sensors on there. So my part of the job was to put sensors on pipes. So this could be a simple pipe, it could be a heat exchanger. My colleagues at Loughborough, Dr. Elliot Woolley, our colleagues Alessandra Simeone in China, Shantou University, they've been working on ultraviolet systems to look at cleaning within tanks. And we've progressed this project for several years. And we've been really fortunate that we managed to do research at different scales. So we've done some benchtop, and most of the work I've shown today is the benchtop because that's where we do most of the machine learning on. But we've actually done this at a semi-pilot scale and a full production scale. Unfortunately, we're not all allowed to show you the full production data, but it would be good for you to see how we can pull this technology through the different technology readiness levels. So a bit about ultrasound. This is a picture I like to show back from 2012. That you probably don't recognise that individual, but that is me. And this is I was at a factory up in the northeast, and this what looks like a shopping trolley is actually what I call the mobile research station. So this has a laptop, oscilloscope, pulse receiver, some other electronics, and that's about 20 to 30,000 pounds worth of equipment to use ultrasound. If we fast forward 5 years, we've got not quite the same capabilities, but similar and good enough for the job for a device that's smaller than a mobile phone. It's wireless, so it's a lot cheaper. You can walk around the factory, and again, because these are connected, we can leave them there. And we actually have some projects where we're streaming the data straight back to into our offices, so the researchers can sit at home, get to the data, develop models. What is ultrasound? It's a mechanical wave. It's just a pressure wave. So as I'm speaking now, my vocal cords vibrate. That makes the air vibrate to the microphone. Convert to electrical signal. That's turned to a vibrational signal again through your laptop, travels through the air to your ear. So the only difference between what I'm doing and our techniques is they're much higher frequency. So they tend to be around 2 megahertz, whereas the real highest frequency a human can speak is about 20 kilohertz. So 100 times higher frequency. So that's how often it vibrates. A lot smaller, a lot more focused as well. Some of the benefits of the technology is they're non-invasive, non-destructive, and they can operate on opaque materials. Challenges are always the same: generating information from data, actionable information, and acquiring data in manufacturing environments is always difficult because of the vibration, the extra complexities. For us, it tends to be like there's lagging or insulation around pipes that we've got to move away, or the pipes are very high temperature, we have to use high temperature transducers. But again, 5-10 years ago, high temperature transducers are quite expensive, quite difficult to use, whereas nowadays we can do that. Principles of operation. So if we look on the top left, we have our transducers blue, and we've got our pipe, and we've got our fouling, which is this orange ring inside. Move to top right, we excite this with the transducer. This piece of material, piezoelectric material, when you put a voltage across, it vibrates back and forth. So if you've got oscillating voltage, it will oscillate. Creates a sound wave which travels through the pipe wall. When it gets to that internal surface, some of the wave will be reflected back. And how much of that wave is reflected back depends on the impedance of the two materials. So the fouling will have a different acoustic impedance if there's no fouling there, air, or if there's flowing water. So that's the principle of operation. We get a different reflected signal if the fouling there is there or not. And we can do, these are just some basic techniques we do to look at the signal. So we'll window it. So we don't want the whole signal, we only want the reflection. I'm not sure where this is on the bottom right. Probably this around here for about 150 sample points to 300. Then we can look at things like the amplitude. We can work out the reflection energy, because that's dependent on the acoustic impedance mismatch. We can also do some methods, root mean square error. So got lots of waveforms from a clean pipe, some from a dirty pipe. We can do stuff like that, or we can look at localized variations, and we can take out the temperature effects. But as I said, we've done stuff in laboratory, in flat rigs, and most of the results I'll show you from this because it's easy to visualize. This is a flat metal plate. We have a fouling on there. The rest of the material is perspex square, and we can pump through cleaning fluids, chemicals. We've also got cameras on here. Now, I'll explain what they're there for in a bit, but you wouldn't be able to use them in a factory environment because everything's contained. We've also seen if this works in circular pipes. We just have an open-ended pipe, and again, we have cameras looking in. This is our pilot scale cleaning rig. On the right, we call this our processing rig, and we pump materials around. On the left, we can put our cleaning materials, and they'll travel along this pipe, and we have a spray ball at the top, which sprays the fluid out, helps clean it. And this is just an image from some of the production sites that we've been working on. This is our absolutely fantastic video. I'm sure those who've seen it before are excited to see it again. And this is just showing the cleaning. So if we start here, we just have some tomato fouling. So this is a material that's very easy to clean. It doesn't adhere to the surface particularly well. It doesn't burn on. This is just an example. Our ultrasonic transducer is under here. We have a camera at the side here, but we also have one directly above. And as we can see, it cleans away. So some people are asking, why have you got that camera? And the camera's there really to give us what we call ground truth data. We need to know, to train an intelligent sensor system on the ultrasonic data, we need to know when was it clean and when was it dirty. So we use our camera system. Now, if all factories were made out of transparent where pipes, it'd be fine. We would just use cameras, but they're not. They use that stainless steel. It's food grade. Also good for heat transfer. We need those in lots of applications. This, I won't play the video, but it just shows you the repeatability experiment. And what we see on the left is a couple of features we've extracted here from the sound waves. So the blue line is the energy, so it's quite low, and then as it cleans, actually I will show one of the videos because then you can see how it cleans. So it's staying rather flat. So this is the malt. So this dissolves into the fluid. So all the materials clean differently. And if we look now, there's no real change, but as this starts becoming clean around the transducer area, we can see it changes and then it goes to clean. The transducer isn't actually, it's only a single point transducer. So where my mouse is, it's just on the other side of that metal, but it's only sensitive to fouling in the area, which is one of the limitations. Although in our current work, we started adding banks arrays on there. The red line on this is the root mean square error. So this just does the opposite, but they show the same trend. And this is very repeatable. So you wouldn't really need machine learning. You just say, well, once the energy goes above 3 or even 4, it's clean. So, and that's probably an important point. A lot of people try and do machine learning because they think it's great, state of the art, but in lots of application sensors, you just don't need it. It's the same with image analysis. So only use it if you have to. This is very different. This is graving. Gravy isn't as easy to clean. You have to heat it or mix it. It's very starchy. It burns on. And if we look at how this cleans, first of all you'll notice the blue line still goes up, but they're very different and they jump all over the place. And this is for a nice controlled lab experiment. Imagine what this would look like. So if I think trying to think number 2 or 3 here, what we can see is initially the moisture is absorbed by it, so it actually swells. And then what it tends to do is just leave as one big lump. I can never remember which one it is that does the big jump. I think it might be the 3rd one here. Let's have a look at this image here. What we'll expect to see is that suddenly just disappears. Yeah, there we go. It just disappears. And they don't always start at the same value or end at the same value. We've got a nice experiment where we control the temperature to 2 decimal places through water coming in because it goes through heat. But you couldn't do that to that kind of precision in the factory. So this change in the energy is very temperature dependent. And this is why it's useful to do some of the machine learning, because we can look at the process trajectory, and we can look at some of the gradients, build them into our model. So we do supervised machine learning binary classification. So by binary, I mean it's either dirty or it's clean. This is our waveform or window of it, and there's lots of different ways we can take features from this waveform. We can look at physical features such as energy, take a part of the waveform, just look at the energy, it's the area under the oscillating parts of the curve. Or we can do some data reduction techniques, such as principal component analysis, k-best predictors features, and that just looks at which features correlate most between dirty and clean. And it's interesting, different types of waveforms, it finds them in different areas, and we've kind of got some ideas why. We can see in the tail we get some features, and there's some area of really interesting research around coda wave ultrasound. This is waves that would actually travel into the soft solid and bounce around in there before coming back, and you get this long tail. So there's some interesting work coming out of France in that area. Other methods you can do are wavelet analysis, but I think for a lot of the different methods we've tried, they all tend to work okay. So I guess it's just what you're most comfortable with. We keep meaning to publish a paper where we just compare all the different methods. But my gut feeling is all of them will be okay-ish, and there's not one that's significantly better than all the others. These are some of the results from the machine learning models. So the top is the images, and as I said, the images is to train the data, is our labeled data. The circle is where the ultrasonic transducer is on the other side of the plate. So on the top we have from images, so where it's orange, that means it's found dirty from the images, so all of these are dirty. 6, only just. 7, it's clean. And these are predictions. So we've got K nearest neighbour, which is one method, put vector machine. So it used to be a very, very popular method of machine learning, but nowadays people tend to use the artificial neural networks and deep learning. Random forest. So anyone's familiar with decision trees, random forest is just combining different decision trees. And AdaBoost. AdaBoost is again an assembly method like random forest, where you take lots of different learners and you combine them together to get a better prediction. So what we can see is all these models predict fairly well, really well, 100%, 99.5. The only problem is the support vector machine. Why doesn't it work? Well, we don't know. And that's ultimately the challenge you're always going to face with machine learning. Occasionally you just get models that don't work and you don't really know why. You can go back and look at some features. It could be some big partition data, you didn't get enough data or the great data, but we're not really sure why that's worked, and that's one of the challenges. One of the other things where you've got to be really conscious of is how you build your data set. So we thought, would it be better just to, I'm not sure if you can see the bottom here, just build a model with one fouling material such as tomato and see how that performs? Would it be better to actually combine all the different fouling materials? So we use tomato, gravy and mold. And what we find is actually, for this particular problem, it is best to combine all the data. And you get model performances up to 99.25. And the reason this is you've just got more data, so the model generalizes better. So machine learning, more data, better model. These are just some of the results we did on the plastic pipe. It's much more difficult to see where the fouling's there from the images, but again, the models perform really well. But we know food factories aren't made out of plastic, they're made out of metal. So this is the SS stainless steel pipe here. Doesn't quite work as well, but it's still fairly good. We've got 99s, 97s there. They're all above the 90s, but it does make some errors. So for example, if we were to look at this AdaBoost here for A at the bottom where I'm circling, you can see actually it's cleaner where these two black lines are, but it's actually making some prediction it's dirty. Now, that's not great, but it's not disastrous. You would probably just clean it a little bit extra. These ones actually, it's telling you it's clean early when it's not quite clean. So that's a bit of a problem. But the way you would overcome this is you would use the machine learning and a bit of common sense. So when the model says it's clean, you would then add on an extra 3 or 4 minutes. That's how I'd see us deploying these in industrial environments. The final part, which is the bit we're really excited about, we've just got a publication review for this, is the kind of transfer learning side of it. So the transfer learning is where you train a model on one set of data and apply it to a different but slightly similar problem. So what we've done here is we've got our cleaning rigs, and we've tried to train a model on the flat rig. We've got our cameras above it, And then we've actually tested it on data from the circular metal rig, but we haven't used any of the labels. So we've just taken that data, but the waveforms look very different. So I haven't got pictures of the waveforms because it's transforming through a different pipe. It was also a different transducer. And this would be a limitation in applying this technique in industries. Every ultrasonic transducer has a slightly different resonance depending on the material properties. And it's very dependent about how you contact that transducer with the side of the wall. So if you take it off and put it back on again and clamp it on, you'll get a different pressure and a different baseline waveform, which would mean every time you took it off or every time you bought a new transducer, you'd have to collect this data, train it, so you'd have to somehow have a way of labeling the data. Maybe you'd stop it and do some tests, and then you could apply it. And this is one of the limitations, not just for factory cleaning, but applying machine learning in general, is collecting that data. So if you've got an already trained system that you can apply, that's great. And that's what we've tried to do. So we've trained the system on the flat rig, and we're going to test it on the metal pipe when the waveforms look totally different. We've developed, so the standard area here is transfer component analysis, and this is the methodology that the research in that area tend to use. We've just developed a single feature method on energy, where we standardize, and we add some additional ones, and the algorithms we've learned on the artificial neural network and long short-term memory neural networks, which are really good at following process trajectories. And the other part is we've just done a model on the target data. So the source domain, flat rig, target, circular. We've also not just been cleaning, we're applying this technique of ultrasonic to other applications such as mixing, monitoring mixing processes. Just starting some work on looking at extrusion processes and how we can do these areas. So this is done by one of our students, Alex Barlow. Some great work there. So these are what the waveform energy looks like. So data set 1 is our flat rig, and data set 9 is our metal pipe. And you can see actually they're very, very different. But when we do some of the standardization methods, normalization, bringing back in time frame, they look quite similar. And there's a few other transforms we do. And what we actually get from these methods is accuracy of, so the single feature method of about 93, and the NTL, which is what we're comparing it to, so these are 93.6 there, 93.8, so almost as good. And this is the same as some of the other examples that we've done. Tend to be about 96, and then, well, 92 to 96 for the non-transfer learning, the basic machine learning, where we train the model each time in the transfer one. So this is something we're really excited about, because this is one of the barriers about using these technologies in industry. Collecting this data, labeling this data. We work on a project on looking at quality parameters of potatoes, such as sugar, dry matter. And the whole problem with this is you can collect lots of data using spectroscopic systems on potatoes. You build a model in 1 year, but you go to the next year, and due to growing conditions with the field, climate, they have very different mean values. So you have to build another model. Now, if each growing season you have to build, validate, test the model, it's only going to be the last part of the season you can actually use this. So what we need is a technique so we can build the model over the first few years and then deploy it afterwards. So these kind of transfer learning methods are something that I'll aid that. I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'm just going to skip through these. This was classification, predicting whether it was a clean or dirty. We've also done some work, the guys out at Shantou University in China, looking at regression models and some more detailed image analysis to predict how much fouling is on there. And again, we're getting very good results. We've just had a publication section on that. I've already talked about these. Some of the challenges are deploying these in the factory, but with these new methods, domain adaptation, well, not new methods, but finding the problem, we're overcoming this challenge. Second part I wanted to talk about, and I'll try and go through this in about 5 or 6 minutes, so we've got time for questions, is IoT enhanced factory cleaning. This was a pilot project we had funded by the Internet of Food Things, and we've also been doing some work on a project in Nottingham called RoboClean, and this is looking at how robots and data and sensors can be used to improve factory cleaning. And this is not so much looking at cleaning inside the pipes, but actually the factory floor. There's 3 components to this project. One of them is looking at the sensors, and so this time we're using near-infrared sensors, so very small, very low-cost ones. And can they detect allergens? So if you're cleaning the factory and you know there shouldn't be any allergens on that line, can it tell us if there is some on there? Another part of this work was we're looking at the data side, the data trust. So what data should we collect on cleaning? How should we analyze that? Who owns the data? Who should be able to see that? lots of areas around there, and I know the Internet Food Things Network are very interested in this idea of data trust, and they should be as well. It's very important. And the other part of it is the multi-agent coordination. So if you've got multiple robots, how do they communicate with each other? And as humans and factory operators, how do we interact with them? So talk about these factories of the future being lights off, but I don't envisage in my lifetime food factories where there's not people working there. These are complex materials, complex processes. There's always going to be roles for humans. The humans working with these technologies. So how do they communicate to the robots? We've actually got a really nice demonstrator where we've got these are just mobile vacuum cleaners that we just use because it's a cheap mobile robot. Well, we've got somewhere we put Amazon Echoes on the back, so you can actually start talking to the robot and try to understand how would a factory operator communicate to that robot. If you wanted to tell it to clean in the corner, would it say clean in the corner? Would it say clean near the mixing vessel? Would it say, or you go to my left and clean? These are the kind of things we need to understand, and how the robot communicate back. I've cleaned that. Is it okay now? Do you want me to go back? So these are what we've been looking at in this project. I guess the bit that I've done the most on is the sensor side, and for this we were just looking to see if these really low cost. I mean, you can get really expensive near-infrared sensors with very wide frequency range. If you chemists listen, you've probably heard of Fourier transform in infrared spectroscopy, benchtop piece of kit. Whereas these are very small. They're not quite at the consumer cheap level, but they're one level above that. So you can see at the bottom right, we just had different samples on this sensor here, and we were just saying, can it tell the difference between different samples? And really with sensors, people go, well, what is can it tell all the different components in there, what they all are, and can it give us the moisture content and concentration? It's very difficult for single measurement, but as part of this project, we did a workshop with food manufacturers there, food standards agency, academics, talking about what is your biggest concern about allergens? And the biggest concern wasn't a small percentage getting into the material. That could be a problem, yes, and something we need to work at. But it was someone picking up peanut flour instead of almond flour. And similar colour, it's a genuine mistake, but it could have a disastrous impact. Or it could be someone picking up a gluten flour instead of a gluten-free. So having a simple low-cost sensor that can say, hang on, that doesn't quite look right. Can you check? So again, the human's in the loop. And as we're moving forward with these technologies, and as we're starting to do some trials with some of our partners, what we're really interested in doing is how can we deploy these, but see them as not a way of replacing humans, but really augmenting them with another skill set, so they can make better decisions and we can make our food manufacturing system safer and more robust. So in this work, we just looked at some different flowers and different flowers and spices, and this is the spectra you receive from it, and we can see they have some similar bumps, probably to do with moisture, around 1800, but they are different for the different materials. This is for the spices. Then we do a method called principal component analysis. So again, this is about dimensionality. We talk about the intensity of all the different, this is reflection techniques, reflective spectra, intensity, all the different wavelengths, but some of those will have redundant information. So what are the one or two principal components that we can extract for that mathematical method to separate our materials? And what we can see is most of the materials are spread out, so we can tell the difference. The ones that seem to overlap the most are the gluten contained in the gluten-free flours. They're the red and the black, and that's not surprising because yes, gluten isn't the only thing in flours. There's different materials in there as well. There's starches, the other parts of it, and they're going to give very similar spectra. So, but we're fairly confident there is some separation there. And this is just for the spices, and as we go for the actual machine learning side, we did some samples, and this is the confusion. So we can see for all 11. For the gluten-contained flour, they predicted 11 as gluten-contained flour, and they got one wrong. All the other samples, they got 100% right. So we're fairly happy with this technique. The things we were doing next is, can it do this measurement while moving, and can it determine it when there's a bit of a mixture? Because we want to put these on cleaning robots. The stuff it's cleaning is probably going to be a mixture of materials. So that's really what we've been looking at there. Yeah, I think I'm just going to jump to the end of this because I want to have a bit of time to answer any questions we've got. We've got slides and publications on these. If anyone is interested, get in touch. We're happy to talk and share more information on this. I think it's just worth mentioning cleaning and decontamination is essential of operation in many parts of our life. And I think it's something the food sector is doing has always been conscious of, but it's probably areas. I mean, if you work in a food factory, you're used to wearing a face mask, a hairnail, for your whole day. Whereas suddenly going into supermarkets now and seeing these, and I just want people to think like how good the food sector is. I think we hear examples of allergens or contaminations, but you just think about what percentage of things go wrong compared to how much food is made and consumed safely. I think they're doing a fantastic job, and that shouldn't be overlooked. The other thing is just think about this balance between safety, hygiene, and the environment. This is really, really important. Every time you go into a supermarket now or a shop and you see that bin outside with that cleaning agent, that bottle, and that blue paper roll filling over the edge, just think, is that good for the environment? Now, what's more important? I wash my hands. That's important because we don't want to transmit a virus. But how can we do it in a sustainable way? And this is always the balance. It's interesting when you speak to the food companies and they say actually one of the impacts financially has been all the extra things we've had to do, and the extra gloves and the extra materials, not for the staff in the factory, but outside the factory as they're on the breaks, and that's the cost. I think what I've tried to demonstrate here is how machine learning is great, but there is some challenges to overcome about collecting that data, about whether we trust those. And I think one of the methods is these aren't going to take over the world on their own. They're going to work with humans, and that's the way we need to develop these technologies. And as we start deploying them in factories, we need ways to do it in a controlled manner. So we're talking about they'll do everything they currently do. They'll make their food, take their sample, send it off to the lab for their test. But why not just have one of our sensors take a measurement, run this project, low-cost project for several months, if not years, and then let's see when they do have problems. Hopefully they won't have any problems, but if they do, did the sensor pick that up as well as the test? And then we can start introducing those. But we don't see these just jumping in straight away. Some of the final bits is, and I just think I've said it a few times, but I think the society in this COVID situation can learn a lot from food manufacturing, and it'd be really great to see technology and ideas transferred from the sector, not coming from the sector to food. I've not done all this research on my own. In fact, I've not done most of it. It's all been in group effort. So we had some great researchers in our lab. So Giuseppe, who's moved on now, Armin's still around, does some great work. Joel, Stuart, Brian in computer science, Alex, who I've missed off, one of my researchers, transfer learning work. Loughborough University, Chanto, Allied Bakery, Samworth Brothers, two sisters, Food and Drink Forum, which represent lots of the SMEs in and around Nottingham, these kinds of areas. Martech of Whitwell, Greencorn, and just to thank all the different funding we've received, the Internet of Few Things, EPSRC, University of Nottingham, Innovate UK, because we've been lucky to get a lot of funding. So that's the end of me. I'll stop waffling on, and if I'll stop sharing the screen. If we've got any questions, we can answer those.